Welcome to the Thriving Mayor Show, the weekly broadcast featuring former and current mayors who are thriving, sharing their story, insight, wisdom, and viewpoint. Join us and comment on social media as we meet another of the superheroes we elect to lead the rejuvenation of our towns and cities and who serve us all. Visit www.thrivingmayor.com to learn more. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the Thriving Mayor Show. It's a weekly show celebrating mayors, the superheroes who we elect to lead our cities and towns. Today on episode number 1, I'm extremely honored to welcome a 3-term mayor from Cobourg, Ontario, Peter Delanty. Peter, how are you?
I'm fine, Michael. I've never heard myself described that way as a mayor before. So thanks very much. That's unusual. I've been called many things, but anyways, as a thriving mayor, well, perfect. I feel better already.
Well, I can attest from personal experience that you certainly are. Just before we launch in, Peter, I just wanted to extend my heartfelt gratitude and thanks to all the mayors and the councilors, staff, and frontline workers who are all putting in such a huge contribution and sacrifice and dedication to help keep all of us safe in our cities and towns. And right from the bottom of my heart, I have a huge amount of gratitude for all of these amazing people. So Peter, first off, can you please tell us what is your favorite park in the town of Cobourg?
Well, my favorite park. Well, my favorite park, that's a great question. It's easy to answer. They got one down here in the east end of Cobourg where they have tennis courts, playgrounds, ball diamonds, and a lot of trees growing and everything else. And it's you'll be able to find it easy. It's called the Peter Delanty Park. And it's not even called the Peter Delanty Memorial Park. So I'm still alive and above ground to look at it each day when I ride by on my bike.
That's amazing. So still getting lots of exercise and enjoying your park.
Lots of exercise. Actually, that's a beautiful park and a great honor that the town gave me to name that after me. But my favorite park, of course, and anyone in Cobourg has to be Victoria Park. A fantastic foresight seen by former mayors way back at the turn of the 20th century who purchased that land and made that park. I mean, we are so lucky to have it.
Mm-hmm. And Victoria Park also is attached right to Victoria Beach, which this year had probably the first time ever we had to close it because of the pandemic.
Yeah, that was really unfortunate. I laughed at one comment. One citizen said to me, he says, well, it'd be good that it's closed. The beach needs to have a year of rest so it can be cleansed. And I said, have you gone down there and seen the thousands of seagulls that are on that beach now?
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's being cleansed. However, it was unfortunate that they had to close that. For us Cobourg people who sort of knew the terrain, if they really wanted to go for a swim and enjoy the water, you just had to go about maybe a quarter to a half mile west of there to the West Beach and go for a swim there. And a lot of people did. It wasn't crowded or anything, but it was nice to be able to swim in Lake Ontario.
Yeah, and that West Beach has quite a nice boardwalk on it as well, and the Ecology Garden, which I think were partially developed under some of your term.
Yes, they were. I don't know whether you want to get into that now, but that was a one of my big highlights. That West Beach walkway. I'm really involved in the Waterfront Trust, Regeneration Waterfront Trust. It's headed up by David Crombie, the former tiny mayor of the city of Toronto. Yeah. And he came up with the concept that we had ceased to look at our lake because it was filled with oil tanks, coal piles, a lot of industrial buildings and things like that. And he said, what a great asset. And he started out trying to get people along the Great Lakes to look back at the lake and see what a magnificent gem we had. And I really believed in that. I thought that's perfect. And one of my visions was to try and open up the waterfront for the citizens of Cobourg. And part of that strategy was the West Beach walkway. I was really delighted when we were able to. We negotiated easements across all the properties.
Almost all.
One property we had to, yeah, right. One property we had to purchase part of it for the walkway. We had a group of people in Cobourg who made up signs, put down and just talked about what you could see by looking out on the lake, bird migration, things like that. But it's become a tremendous walkway used every day by literally hundreds of people. We had David Crombie come down and help us open the walkway.
Wow.
So I'm really delighted. We can go from Ontario Street on the west end of Cobourg right over almost to Church Street on the east end and walk along our waterfront. Not every community has that great privilege.
Yeah,
I'm very proud of that. That our council was very supportive of that.
Yeah, I remember growing up there in the 60s and 70s, and the coal piles and the old wooden ship wharfs from the ferry terminals and the tracks that ran out on the Central Pier and the coal piles and the transformation that our mayors and council have implemented over the years is really spectacular. It's probably one of the most impressive waterfront regeneration stories in probably Canada.
Absolutely. And the as I say, the Waterfront Regeneration Trust has used our waterfront as a model to what can be done in the rest of Ontario. And so we in Cobourg should be very proud of what we've been able to do with our waterfront and what pleasure it brings to us 12 months of the year. It's fantastic.
Yeah. So shifting gears a little bit, Peter, I know there's a long legacy of Delanty politicians in Cobourg, and I was wondering if you could kind of share with us a little bit about that legacy, and also, when you decided that you wanted to become a councillor first, obviously, and then make that big step into mayor.
Well, the Delanty family goes back 4 generations. Back into the 1870s.
Wow.
They originally came from Ireland and settled in Cobourg. And so in those 4 generations, my grandfather, Patrick, he had a business. He was a stone carver. And he came to Cobourg because he had an opportunity to do a lot of work with a local company that was making cars, railway cars and Pullman cars.
Yeah.
And so they were making sinks and things like that and doing a lot of carving in that way. Anyways, he got into the business, and in 1896, he was interested in what was going on in the town, and they asked him to run for council. It was 1-year term then. He ran for council, and he said he enjoyed it. And he said the only problem was it came up a big debate about there has been some vandalism going on in the town, and so there was a petition to have everyone 16 and under off the streets by 9 o'clock, I think it was, at night during the summer, and he voted to do that. And there was a real hue and cry about that. How terrible! How could you do this? Da 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 da. And he said it was starting to affect his business. They rescinded the bylaw, but he said after that that's the only year I wanted to be on council, and he only ran the 1 term. Well, anyways, he did run it, and he was very interested in politics. His son, my dad, Jack Delanty, he also was very interested in politics, and during the 30s, he was mayor of Cobourg for 3 terms.
Wow.
And he, from about 33 to about 36 or something like that. And they won 1-year terms.
Okay.
So when I was growing up in Cobourg, at our house, we talked about sports and that at the table and all those sort of things. But we really did talk a lot about politics. And we had a lot of politicians who would drop around the house because my dad was involved in politics. So from a very early start, I had a real experience with hearing about politics and about what decisions politicians should make and so forth. And After that, though, I did get into a teaching career. And so I put that on the back burner. I was very interested in politics, involved politically, probably provincially and federally.
Well, there's lots of politics in school too.
Yeah, well, yes, there is actually. A ton of it, actually.
Yeah.
Anyway, it wasn't until I had retired as principal of the West Collegiate that I decided I should get into politics. And people were encouraging me to run. It was interesting. I said, well, I've retired. And they said, no, Peter, you should run because it's not that tough a job. I said, it isn't. And I said, naively, well, what's involved? He said, all you got to, I remember them saying to me, all you have to do is go in Friday, pick up the agenda, read it on Sunday afternoon, and go to the meeting Monday night. It's over. Yeah, it's a 2-day job. I said, well, that sounds right up my alley. So anyways, I ended up, we did run and we were successful. And because I headed the polls, I had a choice of which department I wanted to be the representative on. So I chose planning and development because planning is everything. Planning controls where the development's going to go and so forth and under what conditions. And so it dealt with zoning bylaws and all that sort of stuff. So it was a real indoctrination and an education into what council was all about. After that, I realized that there are a lot of things on the agenda that I would like to see happen, but I wasn't controlling the agenda. So that's when I decided I would run for mayor.
Right.
So I ran for mayor in 2000, and I was mayor for 3 terms. And finished up in 2010.
And those were
it was a great experience. As I said, my dad was the mayor of the town. He was also on the public utilities. My grandfather was on council. I had an uncle who was on council. So yeah, it was pretty well in my blood.
So am I correct in assuming that you ran for 4 elections and you won every single one?
Yes, that's right. I headed the polls each time, and the one time I ran for mayor, I didn't have any opposition.
Oh, acclaimed.
So yeah, it was acclaimed. It was. I had a great. That was a lot of fun, and one of the things we made our mind up, my wife and I, was that we would go and we would knock on every door in Cobourg.
Yeah.
And in each campaign, and we did that, and so I got to know a lot of people and. Different parts of the town that I hadn't really paid much attention to or visited, and it helped me after when I was mayor that I knew exactly the streets, the area they were talking about, and I knew what their pluses and minuses were and how we could improve it.
Yeah. So you never really had a stressful election night, but maybe the first one or the first mayoral.
Every election night is stressful. Hey, you never know, which way the people are, which way they're going to go.
Yeah,
you work as hard as you can, and hope that you get rewarded for it. But no, when you're sitting there and waiting for the first polls to come in, it's a tense moment.
Yeah.
No, I never was foolish enough to think I've got it made. That's always a mistake.
Was there ever an election that you went in that you didn't win?
Not that I can recall.
That's amazing, Peter. I my hat's off to you and especially mayors, because there's councillors, there's 4 or 5 or 6 or maybe more councillors, but mayor there's 1, and you're putting your heart and soul out there for the public, basically to judge. And knowing that you're under this public spotlight, the scrutiny, and there's only going to be one winner. So my hat's off. It's that is such an important role that people play, and I think for the rest of us who haven't gone into politics or put ourselves out like that, it seems really intimidating. So I envy the courage that mayors show and applaud you. As well, and congratulations on winning every single election you ever went in.
Well, I think the big thing, Michael, is that you run on your record, And if you feel pretty confident that you've made Cobourg, for instance, a better place to live in, your people, the citizens are intelligent, and they recognize, our town's gone forward. It is a better place to live in. There's new industries in the town. There's new initiatives economically, socially, to make our town better. And generally speaking, they'll say that's good, and we're confident, and we reward you for that. So I think you have to work hard. And every election that comes along, there are different issues that come up for that particular election. But I do think if you have made the town a better place to live in, most citizens will recognize it and reward you for that.
And I really love the way that that you tied in the work that you did as mayor and the parks that you had a hand in. And now that every day when you're riding your bike, you can go by them, you can enjoy them, you can exercise in them, and see that living and lasting legacy.
Well, one of the first things we did, Michael, when we were talking, you're just talking about parks. One of the first things we decided to do the first year I was the mayor was we came up with a slogan: "Let's spiff up the parks," and we focused on Victoria Park. So we put in sidewalks, we planted new trees, we upgraded the buildings. So we did all those things just to make the park a better place to, it was more accessible, and it was more attractive, and we almost gave it a fresh new look. So yeah, parks were important, and that Central Park is so important to Cobourg. It became one of the very first things we did. But being mayor requires you thinking, how am I going to get this council to think beyond the potholes and the street lights, which are out, and they'll always be there, and you'll always have to make sure that they're maintained and they're fixed. So what I would do, Michael, is I'd take within about the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks of the council, I would take the council away for a 2-day session. And in that session, led by people who know how to motivate and how to see what councillors want to do, I'd say, okay, what do you want to achieve in the next 3 years? And a lot of great brainstorming happened. And out of that brainstorming, a lot of creative ideas came up. They weren't mine. They were the councils. They came up with these ideas. We want to do this. And suddenly their focus and my focus was on a global kind of view of running a town of Cobourg. Right. And it wasn't just maintenance and making sure that taxes didn't go skyrocketing and things like that. We knew we had a vision of where we wanted to be at the end of 3 years. And so I would say to each council, okay, we come up with this idea, or councillor rather, you come up with this idea, that's in your department. And I'd say to the other council, well, that's in your department. If it deals with parks, it's in Parks and Rec. If it deals with planning, it's over here. If it deals with roads. And so we divided it up, and I would ask, after about every 3 to 4 months, I would ask the councillors, okay, where are you with those projects that we talked about? Has staff gone the next step on it to make it a reality? And by doing that, I really do think the council started to think beyond the day-to-day maintenance of running a town. And I think that was a big, big part of my success and our councillors' success, is that we had a vision. We knew where we wanted to go. Yeah.
That's really, and I was fortunate, Peter, because that was a really exciting part of my career, were your 10 years.
Yeah, it's no bad.
As mayor, and I recall the town with you leading did a waterfront design competition for the promenade, and I was fortunate. My firm was fortunate enough to win that competition. Yes. Which then parlayed into that project, and then the Rotary Waterfront Park project, and then we did the downtown King Street and the Victoria Park project. And I remember doing Victoria Park. We put a new splash pad in, and then redid the beach hut canteen, and it was really fun working with staff back then, because you with your vision, staff was kind of had an open hand. to a broad brush, they could come in and say, well, let's put a pirate ship, and let's design the splash pad to look like a ship. And it was so much fun as being a landscape architect to work with yourself and the staff.
Look at the results of it.
Oh, now, spectacular.
That has a bit of controversy too, in the sense that, and it worked out really well. There used to be an old pavilion behind the band shell. It had long since been torn down, but the Lions Club came up with an idea. But why don't we have a pavilion at the east end of the park?
Yeah,
I'm sure you recall that. And but that's where the Cobourg Angels girls softball team had played and had won Ontario championships and so forth. So it took a lot of convincing to say to people, okay, that park served a purpose as a ballpark, but now we're going to have it as a different use. And we named part of the Church Street as it extended down towards the park. We ended up calling it Corelli Way.
Oh, yeah.
I remember Rick Stinson, one of our administrators, said, "Well, we could call it Rick Stinson. We could call it Paul Crowley Way." And that's what a great idea. So we did that, and then the Lion and Lioness Club came along and said, "We'll build the pavilion," and that served a great purpose too. A lot of picnics happened there. They've actually had dances there and so forth. Yeah, so that whole revitalization of Victoria Park was significant. And it just as significant, though, as part of it, and certainly not on the grand scale of Victoria Park, was the waterfront park that took place right where the old Diversity plant was, just on Albert Street, just almost completely south of Victoria Hall.
Yeah,
that was another really important step to making Cobourg a better place to live in. I really believe that. With the Diversity plant there, it was an old plant and it had been closed. But if you were standing at King Street looking down from Victoria Park, you couldn't see the waterfront because of that plant. And we talked to the owners. They were from Chicago of the plant, and they said they'd agree that we'll sell that to you for $2.
Wow.
They wanted to get rid of it.
Yeah.
It had been a water treatment plant, and they made chemicals there and so forth for literally decades. Yeah. And I often thought after, the Ontario government and the environmental part of that government knew that land was probably contaminated, but they never did anything to them. Anyway, when we got the land and we tore down the old Diversity plant, it seemed like only a couple of weeks later that the environmental people were down from Toronto and said, "You got to clean that up right away." I thought, gee, they let them go for years as it was a private property. But when we got it, they said, "Clean it up." So we did. And we tore the building down, cleaned it up. And with federal and provincial help, we created that waterfront park. And we got a big donation from our local Rotary Club of, I think it was $250,000.
Yeah.
And that helped us also make that park a beauty spot, a place where you go and sit down and enjoy the waterfront. And we put in a fountains and so forth. I think it was one of the proudest things we did was getting that park and getting rid of that old abandoned plant and giving the town of Cobourg a place that they could be very proud of and use.
Well, I was doing a bit of research on my computer yesterday, and I just put in Peter Delanty, and this photo came up of you and Premier McGuinty and our MPP Lou Rinaldi walking through the site before the construction started, and the Premier just come down and made a donation, which I think was no strings attached. And the smile on your face was really memorable, and that really launched that project. And what do you recall that moment?
I do recall that. So we had created the park, and which was great. And a part of that what happened was they started building condos around it. It was in existence for a few years. And then I came up with an idea of trying to stimulate business downtown in the dreary months of January and February after Christmas. And I also had a vision that we should, because of climate change and that, it was impossible to have natural ice for kids to skate on. And skating inside a rink was fine, but there wasn't, I mean, if you're outdoors, it was different. It was fresh air. It was, you could look around and enjoy the landscape and so forth. So I had this idea, let's have an outdoor rink. And, but of course, it was going to cost a lot of money. So I approached Lou Rinaldi, our MPP, and I said, Lou, all the time I've been mayor, I've never come to you and asked you for a dime. I said, but I am going to ask you for a dime now. He said, well, how can I sell this to the folks in Toronto? I said, it's an economic development sort of thing. We're trying to get people to downtown, go for a skate, go have a coffee, or maybe look in a window and say, oh, I'd like to go and buy that sweater and so forth. And he said, well, okay. So I knew I was on a good line with that. So I just kept pushing it. And anyways, after talking to the people in Toronto, and with tremendous help from Lou, we were able to negotiate, no strings attached, a $1.35 million as a grant of money to build this artificial rink, which was going to stimulate the economic growth of the downtown. Well, it all seemed to be going along swimmingly well, and you're right. Premier McGinty came down, and we had a ceremony and so forth, and so we thought, well, we better get planning and build the rink. Little did we know that a lot of people who had purchased condos on either side of this park regarded the park as their front lawn. And they said, we don't want a rink down here. That's on our front lawn. Yeah. I said, well, no, that actually belongs to every citizen in Cobourg, this park. So, but anyways, what happened was that they started up a petition, and they were very, very well organized and a strong position. The NIMBYs, they had people signing the petition after they came out of church on Sunday. They had them up when you were coming out of the supermarkets, signing up, and they're saying, oh, they'll be playing hockey on it till 3 o'clock in the morning, and it will be terrible, and what a terrible thing to do with the park. So suddenly I thought, well, when I started out, I thought, well, everyone's going to support this. And suddenly council was divided right down the middle. Yeah. And the vote was was ending up being 4-3, every decision we make as we went along. And I remember one councillor McGaughy, he had his sailboat. His boat was down in Florida, and he was bringing it back from Florida up through the intercoastal waterway. Yeah. So he was coming up, and I really needed that boat, because so I was having to contact Dean and say, Dean, where are you? And he was just south of New York, out in the Atlantic someplace. And I said, you've got to be back by next Monday night. He said, oh, don't worry. But I was worried. And he did get up, and he went through, he would give me almost daily reports that he's in New York City looking at the Statue of Liberty. I said, forget that. Keep that motor going. And up the Erie Canal. And I think his wife picked him up as they're coming into Lake Ontario and drove him around. He came in to the council meeting, which started at 7. He rolled in there at about 20 after 6. Wow. Jeez, I was very pleased to see him. Anyways, the vote was 4-3, and one councillor who was supporting us said, look, I'm getting a lot of heat from a lot of people and a lot of pressure. And if that rink is 1 cent over the $1.35 million, I'm not going to vote for it. Yeah. Because I'd been looking at it and saying, we should make it about another 10 feet longer. And so I had to put that on the back burner. I wasn't able to do that. Yeah. But it was so it was a very difficult, even up to the I remember when they were coming down to start to clear the land to build it. One of the protesters came down and was standing in front of the shovel. And so the fellow operating the shovel, he owned the shovel. He listened to him, and he said, "Okay, I've listened to you. Now get off here. I'm going to start digging." I mean, right up to that moment, there were still people who were protesting to the last second. It did go in, and anyone who lives in Cobourg knows that during the January, February, and the latter part of December, that rink is full nearly every day, and right up till about 8 o'clock at night when it's closed down. And during the summer, we put up a pond on it with a fountain, and it's really a cooling kind of experience during the summer. It's been a great success, and So, but it was a tough battle. We couldn't hold our council meetings in the council chamber. We had to hold them in a large the ballroom, the concert hall, because there's so many people coming to the meetings. And you had to be careful with every word you said, because they would say, "Oh, there, see, he said something that maybe we can turn this around."
Do you remember the one presentation that we made, Peter, right before the vote? And we said we're going to do a presentation at, I think, 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. to give people a chance to come and hear it.
Yeah, I remember.
The ballroom was full.
Yes,
it's quarter after 6. And then you came to me and you said, "Mike, are you ready?" I go, "I'm ready. Presentation now."
Yes.
So we sped it up by 45 minutes, did the presentation, and it went great. And at 9 o'clock, 2 people came, which was kind of anticlimactic.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
And should we share with our listeners what the nickname that the rink was given?
Well, sure, that's good. The opponents to it thought, well, we got to give it a name that it's degrading, and sort of they call it the Frink.
Right.
And your listeners and viewers can quickly decipher what that was all about.
Yeah.
Actually, the name is kind of hung on. The people still affectionately call it the Frink today.
Yeah.
And, by the way, economically, it did work. I remember someone who worked at Somerville's said they were all sold out of used skates.
Yeah.
And he said that's never happened before. And people were saying, well, yes, we do see people downtown. They are coming in and having a coffee after because they're cold, or hot chocolate. So it did bring people downtown. And I think it still does today. Otherwise, during those cold months, they may not come down to the main street for literally weeks on end.
Yeah. I still enjoy it quite often as well. And last year I was skating at the new CCC, and we stopped and just to chat. And they said, "Yeah, it's too cold today to skate down at the Frink." And I said, "Oh, do you know why it's called the Frink?" "Well, the town calls it the Frink. It has a Facebook page and an Instagram page." And I said, "Well, no, that's not why it's called the Frink, but it's a beautiful spot, and everybody can agree on that."
Yeah.
So, Peter, I just really wanted to thank you so much for being our first guest on the Thriving Mayor Show, and to share with us some of the amazing projects and legacies that you've left in Cobourg. And just wanted to see if you had any last thoughts that you wanted to share before we sign off.
Actually, Michael, I do. We've talked about some of the accomplishments that my council's had, and they're all hard things, like a boardwalk, a rink, a park, so forth. But there are a lot of soft things that happened that I think were really important and proved the quality of life in the town of Cobourg. For instance, in our first council that I had, we had. I was also part of the health unit in Port Hope. And so I championed the idea of let's ban smoking in public places. Wow. And so we started that campaign. And you might say, well, today, who would even think that smoking should be in public places? But then we had every restaurateur came to the council meetings to say it's going to destroy us. People will go to Port Hope. That didn't happen, of course, but it was a contentious fight. We were the first municipality in Northumberland to ban smoking. I'm very proud of that. Another thing we did, we had people come to us and say, we'd like to, we moved to Cobourg, we love it, but we can't sleep at night because we hear these trains going through.
Oh.
And there's 100 trains go through a day on our main lines. So we formed a committee, and we talked to CN and CP, and with our staff, we were able to get the whistles turned off in the town of Cobourg. Well, that improves the quality of life for the folks who live in Cobourg. So there are those sort of things that also were in the mix of making our town a better place to live in. And in the end, when my term was up, I could look back and say, I really do think Cobourg is a better place now than it was 10 years ago. I mean, I guess one of the crowning achievements was getting the CCC, which was a $30 million project, and the federal government put in 10 million, the province put in 10 million, and we had to get the other 10 million. So that was a crowning one, but people kind of forget that right across the road from the CC is Northern Industrial Park. We took a big gamble early on in my first term as mayor, and we decided, and with the help of our staff, of our senior staff, we were going to purchase Northern Industrial Park.
Wow.
$16 million. $16 million. It was a big gamble because we didn't have $16 million, eh? And so we had to borrow to get that park. So we had confidence that park could stay filled, and we went in, and every year we would end up with a surplus, and we poured it back into improving the infrastructure, the roads, and everything else, the roofs. And today that $16 million, that loan is paid for, and the town is getting, I don't know what the figures are today, but during my term, they were getting $1 million back a year, which allowed the town to do extra things that otherwise they couldn't do unless they had to raise taxes. So Northern Industrial Park, really, we were able to keep those plants in the town, and we were able to gain revenue from it, and we were able to say to the taxpayers of Cobourg, we're going to do this, we're going to fix this part of town, whatever it happened to be, but we're not going to have to raise taxes.
Wow.
So those are the soft things, that really contributed to making the town a better place.
Yeah. And as mayor, it's again, congratulations on that foresight and imagination and initiative. Because without initiative, then these things just don't happen.
Yeah, and Michael, I want to make sure. I mean, okay, I was the mayor, and I believed in that. I believed in getting things done and making the place better. But that wouldn't have happened with a strong senior administration, without a strong council. I was very, very fortunate to have both.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much, Peter. It's been a pleasure and an honor to host you as our first featured mayor on the Thriving Mayor Show.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it. It was fun.
Thank you. And watch your social media feeds for promotion for our show next week. And thanks, everyone. And thank you again, Peter.
Okay, Michael, you take care now.
Have a great day.
Thank you for joining the Thriving Mayor Show. Make sure to like and share and tell your friends and colleagues. Mayors are awesome and are the change agents to enhance the quality of living for over 80% of us. Remember what Coach Wooden said, you cannot live a perfect day without doing something for someone who can never repay you. Much love and peace. Until next time.